Hey guys, in this video I'm going to demonstrate the sketch Photoshop action. The way the action works is that you start off with your photo, you brush over your photo the areas that you want to turn into a sketch, run the action and it will transform it into a sketch effect. Now what you can notice from this result is that his upper body is quite detailed, and as you go down you can see that it turns into like a rough outline sketch. And if I go back to the area that I brushed, you can see that I clearly brushed down the bottom here. So what you can actually do when the action's playing back, you can define the areas that you want to be, you want to have in more detail, and the rest will turn into a outline sketch. Okay, so I'll demonstrate all that when we jump into Photoshop. Now the second example, I'm going to work with this photo, and that will be the area that I define, and that is what we're going to create. Now you'll notice in this example that he's actually cast a shadow down here, so it makes it look like he's coming off the paper. Now with this action, your subject will cast a shadow if you fill in your subject with hard edges. So you can see that there's a clear definable edge here. Okay, now that will cast a shadow. Okay, and with this action there are three shadow options. You can go for left, right and down. So this is a down option here, but I'll go into that in more detail. So if I go back to this one, you can see that there's no definable edge here, so he won't cast a shadow. Okay, so that's just an option, but yeah, I'll show you how all that works. And you can see here also that this was the area that I defined to have in a lot of detail, and the rest will turn into an outline sketch. So if I go back, you can see that here. So here is all the detail, and then it sort of, yeah, fades off into a rough sketch. Okay, let me jump into Photoshop now, and here's my photo. I'll put a link to this photo down below. If you guys want to follow along with me, you can do that. Just download the highest resolution version of this photo. Okay, so a few things you just got to check off just to make sure your Photoshop document is set up correctly and you don't run into any errors. So firstly, open up your photo and look into your layer panel. Okay, click on this icon here and go down to panel options. Right down the bottom here, just make sure add copy to copy layers and groups is ticked. Click OK. Next, go to image mode and make sure you're working in RGB color mode and 8 bits of channel is selected. Next, go to image size. You can see the size of the photo here, 1900 by 2900. Okay, and as always, it's always best to work with high resolution photos. I recommend a range of anywhere between 2000 or 4000 pixels when working with photo effect actions. Okay, so I'll click OK there. I'm just going to drag this back here for a second. Right, so the next step is to load up the brushes that were included in the download. So if you just hover your mouse over your photo and hit B, that will activate the brush tool. Now if you right click, that will bring up the brushes panel. Okay, these are the brushes here, but what you need to do is if you click on this icon, you can either go to load brushes or replace brushes. So I'm just going to reset these brushes for a second. So these are the default Photoshop brushes. So if you wanted to just add the brushes down the bottom here and not have to replace all those, just go to load brushes or replace. So I'm just going to replace these, and I'm going to choose the sketch brushes.abr file, and there they are there. Now when you've loaded up the brushes, make sure your brush opacity is at 100%. Okay, now we need to load up the action. So go to Window, Actions, and it should pop up to the side here. Click on this icon and go to Load Actions. Select the sketch.atn file, and here it is here. Alright, so what we need to do now is create a new layer called Brush, and that will be the layer that we brush onto to define the area that we want to turn into a sketch. So if you just go to Layer, New Layer, and this must be called Brush, all in lowercase letters, no spaces. Click OK. So with this brush layer selected, we just want to hit B and grab this soft brush that I included in the brushes. So click on that, and you can choose any color to brush on to your photo with. and start brushing away. Now just keep in mind that when you're brushing, this will be the total sketch area, and that includes the where is it? That includes the rough outline sketch here. Okay, so I'm just going to hide this for a second. I want his upper body to be in detail and the rest to be an outline sketch. So I'm just going to brush all down here. Alright, so now we're ready to go. Now if you look into the actions panel now, you've got your sketch action and folder. So we've got 4 different actions here, and you can see these ones here. You've got shadow angle down, left and right. I'll demonstrate these in the second example when we work with this photo here, okay? But just for the moment, we're just going to run the sketch action. So all you need to do is, when you've brushed away the photo, you've got your brush layer created, is just select the sketch action and press play, okay? Now when you press play, you'll get a pop-up pretty much straight away that says, in the next step, start brushing the areas on your photo that you want to have the most sketch detail. Any area you don't brush will turn into an outline sketch. When you have finished brushing, simply press the play button in the actions panel to resume the action playback. If you need help with this step, just check back on this video tutorial. Click stop below to proceed. So just click stop on this message that comes up, okay? And you'll notice that the actions panel is opened up here. So don't click around anywhere here. All you need to do is start brushing on your photo the areas that you want to have in the most amount of detail. So I want all this area to be in detail, and all this this remaining area that I haven't brushed, that is going to turn into an outline sketch, okay? And it's very important that you leave some area to form an outline sketch, or you might run into an area with the action. So if I just did this, covered the whole area, you're probably going to run into an error because the action needs some space to create some of those outline sketches. Okay, so that is, let's brush it a little more here. That's the area that I want in detail. So all you need to do now is click play in the actions panel, and the action will resume. Alright, so from here it's going to take anywhere between 1 to 2 minutes to play back. That will depend on the size of your photo and the speed of your computer. So I'm just going to fast forward the video and I'll get to the result. Alright, the action just finished playing back, and there is my result. So you can just collapse the actions panel, and I'm just going to expand my layer panel a bit here. Okay, now the first thing you always want to do when using my actions is collapse all the folders that are open after the actions finish playing back. So you can see all those folders are open. So to clean everything up and collapse those, all you need to do is hold down Control, Alt or Command Option, and click on this folder arrow here, click on that, and then reopen the folder, and then the folders are all collapsed. Okay, so if I just collapse this folder here, you can see that folder has all the effects inside. And if you wanted to run the action again, I've left the brush layer on at the top here, so you need to delete the sketch folder to start again. So say if you wanted to try a different area to have in more detail, delete the sketch folder, yeah, and then run the action again. Alright, so let's go inside here and start from the top. So this one here is just called overall sharpening, and I've got in brackets here opacity. So whenever I've got a layer and I've got in brackets opacity, I'm just encouraging you to experiment with that layer through its opacity. So at the moment this one's set to 60%. All this layer does, it adds a little bit of overall sharpening to your design. So if I just turn it to 100, you probably won't see it, but I'll flick between 100 and 0. You might be able to see that there, but it will just boost the sharpening of your photo. So with that 60%. Now this layer here, reveal normal color photo, and I've got in brackets here brush mask. So if I turn this layer on and off, you can see it does nothing. It's because this mask is black, and if it's black, it's hiding the elements of that layer. So if I hit Control or Command I to invert that layer, okay, all that is, it is a cutout of the area that we wanted in detail, and it's just our normal photo, and it's put above all the other elements. And so the way to use this layer is select the mask, and if you hit B, you can either use the soft brush here, or the brush I'd like to use is either this one or this one. So I'll just grab this one here. Now if I switch this to white and brush onto the mask, you can start revealing some of your original color photo. Okay, now you'll notice that the blend mode of this layer is set to normal, and what I like to experiment here is changing it to say overlay, soft light, hard light. You can try those three. You can try any one of those. Another good one to play around with is color. So all that'll transfer through to the layers below is the color from this layer. So if I flip this back to normal, and I'll just flip between color and normal so you can see the difference there. So play around with those, but I'll turn that off for the moment. This layer here, overall color tint, if you want to apply a tint to your design, just double click on this white box and you can select a cream color, so you can select a new color there. Alright, it's pretty simple. This layer here, subject contrast, opacity, so this layer's opacity is at 70%. Now if I drag this to 0, then 100, you can see the difference there. So by default that's at 70, play around with that one. Overall contrast, this is at 60%, so I'll drag this to 0, then 100. So you can see this layer makes quite a dramatic difference to the contrast of your design. So definitely want to play around with that one. Overall brightness adjustments, if I turn this folder on and off, you can see the difference there. So if you go inside here, I had to create 4 different, well, I've got layers and folders here which all control different areas of brightness. So if I just turn this all on one by one, you can see how each one targets a slightly different area. So you can double click on these layers and you can play around with these settings here. So this one, you play around the exposure or gamma correction here. Play around with that. You know, this one here, you can drag these handles around. Okay, so play around with that one. White pencil strokes. If I turn this folder on and off, okay, if you look at this part here on his jacket, you can see that white stroke there, a little bit on his eyes. So the way these layers work in here, it looks for the brightest areas in your photo and just adds a subtle white stroke to those areas. So if you wanted to boost, if you want to make those more prominent, you could select the folder, hit Control or Command J over and over, and that will just keep stacking the pixels on top of each other, which will make it a bit more noticeable. Okay, but if you don't want them, turn them off, or if you just want them in a particular area, select the mask and brush black into the mask, the areas that you don't want. Okay, and it will remove them. And I encourage, like, when you're brushing into these masks, to try and use either this one, or this one. It'll just make everything look a lot more, a bit more organic than using the soft brush, because this brush has a pencil texture. Alright, this layer here, subject sharpening. So if I drag this to 100 and 0, you can see the difference there. So at default, I had it at 20%. So if you don't want it, just turn off or drag that to 0. Okay. If you want to add some subtle black edge outlines, just turn this layer on. You can see that there when I turn it on. Alright. Again, you can control that. Well, I forgot to add a mask to this, but if you just select this add layer mask icon here, okay, you can again control where you want those black lines to appear. Alright, this layer here, subject brightness adjustments. So this adjustment layer here specifically targets the area that you wanted to have in detail. So you can see as I drag that around, it's only targeting that area that we specified when the action started playing back. Okay, so you can just play around with these handles here, fine tune the brightness of that area. This folder here is the main sketch texture. If you turn this off, it pretty much kills the visibility of everything. Okay, so if you go inside here, there's just one layer, and that is our sketch texture. Okay, now the one thing I like to do with this layer is, well, on the folder here, is to select the mask, and you can see that we've got this pretty definable edge here. It's because, you know, that was the area that we defined. Alright, so the texture sort of fade off from that area. Now, if you wanted a bit more of a random edge, what I like to do is select that mask on that folder, hit B, grab this brush here. Now, if I switch this to white and start brushing on, oh sorry, black, because I want to hide some of this layer. So you can see when I hide this layer, it's just turned this area to white. So now if I brush black, you see that we can randomize this edge a bit more. Okay, and you can cut into your subject a bit if you want to do that. Alright, so that's one thing I like to do every time when running this action, is just jump onto that folder mask, brush black, and select this mask here, and, you know, brush around the edges a bit. Okay, and if you wanted to reveal some of those edges again, just flip this to white because we want to show it, and start brushing again. Alright, now this folder here, shadow, you can see that when I turn it on and off, it does nothing. It's because we have a soft edge. Alright, and like I said at the start of the tutorial, if you fill in your subject with a hard edge, it will cast a shadow. Okay, so that's why in this example you can just see it if I turn it on and off. It's very, very subtle, but it will be completely definable when you brush over your subject with a hard edge. Alright, so I'll come back to this folder in the next example. Okay, this layer here, increase realism, opacity. So if I drag this opacity down, you can see our image starts to lose a lot of detail. It's still definable, okay, but as you increase the opacity of this layer, it increases the realism of the sketch. Okay, so you can play around with that. And what you might want to do here, say if I drag this up to about 70%, and maybe I'm thinking, okay, I want his face in that amount of detail, but not so much down here. Again, select the mask, grab a black brush because we want to hide this layer. Okay, and start brushing away over those areas that you don't want to be so detailed. Now when I play around with the opacity of this layer, it's only really, you know, targeting that area that we haven't brushed onto the mask. Alright, so I'm just going to let's undo that. So that's 50%. Alright, this folder here, sketch outlines, if I turn that on and off, okay, so you can see that was the area that we didn't define to have detail, so it turns into a outline sketch. Alright, if you want those lines to be much more visible, you can quickly just duplicate the folder, okay, and that'll increase the darkness of those layers. Or you go inside the sketch outlines folder, and there are 4 different layers that build up this look. So I'll start with the top one here. Okay, some of them might be very subtle. Alright, so if I go inside the mask here, you can see that that is where the lines are, but the opacity of these layers are quite low, so currently it's at 30%. If I drag it to 100, you can see those lines start to come through then. So play around with the opacity of these. This one here, okay, sketch outlines 2 is pretty much the main visible outline layer that you want to play around with. Alright, crosshatch sketch, that's a very subtle sort of random texture there. You can see if I increase the opacity, see those. And another sketch layer down the bottom here, so you can see that there. Again, just control the mask, the areas where you want that to be visible. So I like this little bit here on the brick wall, so I might just fill that mask black and brush white to reveal that little area there. I'll just lower the opacity a bit. Alright, so it just gives a little bit of detail there. We'll turn auto select off. Okay, so that's the sketch outlines folder. If you don't want it, just turn it off. White sketch texture is only really visible when you brush over your subject with a hard edge again. Alright, so that'll be visible in the next example I'll show you. Sketch texture bleed. If I turn this on and off, you can see that just adds a texture to the edges of the area that we define to have in a lot of detail. So it just makes a transition between the area that you defined to the outside area just much more fluid. Okay, so you can see that there. Again, play around with the opacity. It's at 20%. If you want it to be much darker, just crank that up. Background sketch texture. If I turn it on and off, oops, there we go, you can see that there. Again, opacity is quite low, so you can start turning that up there, and it adds a bit of texture there in the background. Alright, this layer here, add paper lighting. If I turn this on, okay, you can see that it adds some darkness to the edges here, and it's a bit brighter through the middle. Now what you can do with this layer is just double click on it, and you can play around with the angle here. And you see that just adds a little bit of lighting to your design. So play around with that. But what I like to do is, say you want to have a much darker background. So here is, this layer here is called background lightness. So if you just double click on this box, and say I wanted a, oops, let's turn this off for a second. Say if I wanted quite a dark background. Okay. Firstly, what you might want to do after you've darkened your background is jump to the subject brightness adjustments. Okay. And you can play around now with, fine-tuning the lightness of your subject, and you see what really starts to come out then is these white pencil strokes. You see those there. Okay. Now, when I've done that, you can add this this lighting layer back, and you can see now when I rotate this, it has much more of a dramatic effect. So maybe, I might just want to use a little bit of this. Okay, and let's add a bit of color back into this, something like that. Now, one thing I like to do, if you've darkened up your design quite a bit, is an easy way to sort of brighten up details that you want to be a bit more in focus. So if you go up to the top here, just click on overall sharpening and create a new layer, Control Shift N or Command Shift N. Okay, and then if you change this blend mode to overlay, if I grab my brush, I'll choose this one, and if I brush white, you can see it starts to brighten up that area that we brush onto. So I want his face to be a real focal point, maybe his hands a little bit. So you can see if I turn this on and off now. Okay, you can fine tune that as well, just through the opacity once you've brushed onto that layer. Okay, another thing you can do with this lighting layer is adjust the scale here. So if I adjust that, you can play around with that. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. That is essentially all the layers we've gone through now. And one other thing you might want to play around with is adding your own paper texture into the design. So if I just click on this top layer here, you can go to File, Place Embedded. Now I've got this paper texture here. Okay, so that will land into your Photoshop document. Now I can rotate this, and I'll zoom out a bit and scale that up. Okay, so now I've got this paper texture in the design. Now what you can do here is just change the blend mode to multiple. Okay, and you can see it's very subtle, but it's added the texture of that paper into the design. Now if you're thinking, it's added, it's made everything a bit too dark, what you can do is just add an adjustment layer at the top here, just say levels, and you can drag this right hand corner marker here to the left, which will increase the brightness of your design. Alright, something like that. Alright, that's looking pretty cool. So that's it. I'll just collapse the sketch folder, so I'll turn it on and off so you can see the before and after there. So a massive difference. and really easy to do. So what I'm going to do now is move on to the next example. Okay, so the first thing I need to do here is create my brush layer. So go to Layer, New Layer, call that Brush, click OK. Now, my subject is heavily contrasted against this white background here, so I can just select the Wand tool, W, Magic Wand tool here, and if I just click on the background here, you can see that it's made a good selection around my subject. Now, if you want to fill in a selection of the shortcut keys, you hold down Alt, Backspace, or Option Backspace, and that will fill the selection with your foreground color here. So if I just flip this to black, I fill that, you can see it's filled our selection in black, but it's filled the background because that was the area that we clicked on our background. So we need to invert that selection. So if you hold down Control Shift I or Command Shift I, that will invert the selection. Now Alt or Option Backspace, that will fill in our selection. So it's done an okay job. It's missed just a couple areas here down the bottom. So I'm just going to grab the pen tool, hit P, and I'm just going to quickly just drag out and fill that in there. Now to close off a pen selection, you just hold down Control or Command Enter. That'll turn that into a selection. Now Alt or Option Backspace, and that will fill that selection. Just a little bit on his fingers here. No, that'll do. Okay, so there we go. Got my brush layer. There is a selection. So now, if we twirl open the Actions panel, these three actions come into play because we've defined a hard edge. It's now going to cast a shadow. Alright, now you can choose shadow angle down, left or right. So I want the shadow to sort of come down a bit from the top. So I'm going to select the down option here, and I'm going to click play. And again, you're going to come up with this window asking you to define the area that you want to have in detail. So I'm just going to start brushing. And after that window's popped up, I've already selected the brush for you. So all you need to do is just start brushing. Okay, so I want all that area there to be in detail. His legs are going to turn into a outline sketch. Okay, and I just click play again, and the action will resume. So I'll just jump to the result. Okay, so here you can see that the shadow has been created, and it's created down from the top of our subject. Alright, so I'm going to now collapse all these folders here. So Control, Alt or Command Option, click on the folder arrow, then reopen the folder. Now the first thing I want to do here is jump to the Reveal Normal Color photo layer, select the mask, hit B, make sure white is my active color because I want to reveal some of this layer. Now if I start brushing here, I can reveal the normal photo here. So I want to create a transition between a really realistic looking sketch here, and it sort of fades off, gets much looser as we go down. Alright, and I want it to look like he's sort of leaping off the paper a bit here. Now if we go down here to the shadow folder, so turn it on and off. So there you can see the shadow. Now, if you jump inside here, there's 3 layers. Now this one down the bottom here, main shadow shape. If I turn that on and off, that is the main shadow there. And you can adjust the opacity of this layer. Currently it's at 30%. You can turn that up to make it really dark if you want. Now you can see the shadow here. The shadow starts off much more, much darker around the base of the detailed area that you define. As it goes up, it sort of fades off and blurs out. Alright, so I'm just going to change that opacity back. Now this layer here, shadow texture density, if I turn that on and off, that just adds a lot more texture into the shadow. You can use that if you want. And this one here, shadow texture bleed. Okay, you can see that layer there. Now this layer here, white sketch texture, if I turn that on and off, that texture is applied to the area of the shadow. So if I turn that opacity up, so you can see that white texture there, and I've done that so in some cases it can help define the shadow a bit more. Okay, or you can duplicate that layer, Control or Command J, and that will make it much more prominent. Okay, now another thing I want to do is jump into the Sketch Outlines folder. I'm going to jump to Sketch Outlines 2 and just increase the opacity of that a little bit. Alright, now another thing I want to do is reduce the amount of texture through this whole upper area here behind our subject. Okay, so there's a couple steps you're going to have to do here to create this. So if I turn this folder on and off, so that's has all the texture there, the main sketch texture. So I wanted to reduce the amount behind my subject. So if I turn this folder on and off, you see it cuts into our subject, which is what I don't want. I want his arms, for example, to still have that texture, but everywhere behind him, I want to reduce that amount. So what we need to do here is select this folder, and we need to group it again because we want to add another mask to this. Okay, so if you hold down Control or Command G, that will group all these together. Alright, now what I want to do is I want to have the mask doesn't affect our subject. Okay, so what you need to do is hold down Control or Command, and you can click on the brush layer at the top here. So that creates a selection. Excuse me. So if you now click on the Add Layer Mask icon in the bottom here, what that's done is you can see it's now added this mask. So if I hold down Alt or Option and click on that mask, you can see basically what this is doing now is that all the elements within this folder are only going to be visible in this white area. Okay, so we've achieved, the texture's now running through his arms and everywhere, and you can see the shadow is still there. So we've got the shadow folder here. So if you don't want any of that texture behind him, you just need to do those couple of steps. Okay, and then you can increase the shadow opacity if you want that to be a bit darker. So if you're just going for this look here, just perform those couple of steps. But what you can also do, if you want to reveal some of that original texture, you can double click on this layer mask that you just created and lower the density here. You can see as I start to lower the density, see that texture start to come back in. So maybe you just want, just a little bit of texture behind there. Excuse me. Okay, I might just lower this shadow opacity back down again, maybe at 40%. Okay, so guys, that's it. I'll put a link to my help page down below if you're having troubles with the action, and I will also put a link to some free paper textures if you want to use that technique I showed earlier of importing your own paper textures. Okay, thanks everyone.